So this is my Rysel RCR Pro. Now I have spent the last 2 months riding on it. I've done all kinds of different rides, hilly rides, flat rides, good roads, horrendous roads. I've raced on it. And today I'm going to go through my general thoughts on it, what I like about it, what I don't like about it, and what I've changed about it, and just generally how it is owning this bike as someone who is a casual cyclist and not a professional world tour rider. If you aren't familiar with Rysel, they are a Dutch cycling brand founded in 2019. They're actually owned by Decathlon, which is quite interesting because Decathlon are synonymous with good value entry-level bikes. I think they created Rysel as a bit of a side brand, almost to market more premium level bikes. However, that said, the RCR lineup is their first real stab at a professional level world tour race bike. So I think when it was first announced, there was quite a few concerns that it was going to be a cheap top-end bike, which you typically associate with cutting corners, cheap components and so forth, but it was actually designed in collaboration with a French aerospace company. There's a lot of scientific backing that's gone into the production of this bike and the design. And to further help with the credibility of this bike, Decathlon or Rysel have sponsored AG2R Le Mondial, who are a professional world tour cycling team who have spent the season riding this bike, and they've had a really good season actually, and it's created quite a bit of hype around this bike and the different iterations of it, of which there are 4 different versions of the RCR, starting with the base model through to that world tour replica spec, which is what the AG2R guys are riding. Now I won't go through each and every one of them, but I will put the specs on the screen here so you can pause it and have a gander yourself. Now the first version I got to ride was actually the RCR base model. I took that out to Nice with us when we went over to shoot the Ironman, and it was spectacular. And then after a couple of weeks of riding that, we swapped it out for the Rysel RCR Pro, which is the one behind me. Now, there are quite a lot of differences between that base model and this Pro model in terms of just how it feels and also the specs. Specs on this thing are just an absolute joke. It is 7.2 kilograms in weight in a size medium. This is a size large, so it's probably a little bit more than that. Of course, at that weight, it's a full carbon rig out. This carbon frame is actually the same one that they used on the World Tour spec that the AG2R Le Mondial guys are riding. And I'll talk a bit more about that later because it's very nice. The group set we're running is Shimano Ultegra Di2. It's my first go on Shimano. All the bikes I've had prior to that SRAM. So far, so good. Can't complain, it shifts really nicely when you get used to the actual shifting mechanisms. The wheels are Ultegra C36 and the tyres that it comes with are Michelin Power Cups, I think 28mm with the tan walls, looks quite nice. Comes with a built-in power meter in the crank, which I think is a really nice addition. I mean, you would hope at this price point most bikes would come with a power meter built in, but they don't. Not that it matters for me anyway, because I run the Rally RS200 pedals from Garmin. The stem and handlebar are from Data, so really nice quality products there. You don't get the integrated cockpit at this level of bike. You have to get the actual World Tour replica spec for that integrated cockpit. Obviously that looks sick. I'm not too fussed about it personally. I think this one still looks really nice. And this thing retails at 5.5 grand, so it's still a fat chunk of cash, goes without saying, but compared to the rest of the market, I think the spec you get for the price is actually really good value, especially when you start comparing it to some of the equivalents from the big boys in the space, Specialized SL8s of the world, Trek Madones, Cannondale Super 6 Evos, etc. In the name of transparency, I am working with Rysel for the year. I did not buy this bike or the RCR base model that I was riding on. These were just loaned to me for the year to create content for my social media channels. Since getting it, I have ridden over 1,000 kilometers on it. Like I said, I've done different hilly rides, big days out in the Peak District. I've done flat rides around the Cheshire Lanes. I've raced on it. I've raced a triathlon on it. And just generally speaking, it is an unbelievable bike. I've had such a good time riding it. Frame on the base model is pretty stiff, but that Pro frame is just a different level of stiff. It is so responsive. When you put your power through it, you just move. It tends to get me up the hills quicker. My average speed has gone up quite significantly since I've been riding this thing. And it's a bike that is just far beyond my abilities as a rider. I am just a casual rider. I'm not a professional racer or anything like that, but it's just been a joy to ride. And it feels premium. There is no corners that have been cut during the production or manufacturing, design, whatever for this bike. It is as legit as they come. And that goes for the base model and this Pro model. I can only imagine the World Tour replica spec is just a different gravy. Now, I assume it is a symptom of the bike being so stiff. However, when you are riding on poor condition roads, badly tarmacked roads, potholes and stuff, you feel every single bump in the road. It's very, very noticeable. You get a lot of road buzz in your hands and even on your arse sometimes as well, depending on the surface. It is a very, very lively ride. So what I'm going to do to mitigate that is set it up tubeless and potentially run some bigger tires. It is tubeless ready, so you can just go out there and put some sealant in it. You don't need to switch the wheels or the tires or anything like that. But I think what I will do is maybe upgrade to 30 or 32s, especially come winter, so I can run them at lower pressures and just reduce that road buzz on the shit quality roads that I have to ride on sometimes. I have also switched the stock saddle that it came with, because it comes with this Physique Anti-Res, I think it's called. It doesn't have a pressure relief slit in the seat, so I found when I was on longer rides it would start to hurt my arse a little bit. I prefer the seats with the slit in there just to relieve the pressure a bit on your arse. And one thing I realised pretty quickly was the gearing setup was not favourable for the majority of the riding that I was doing. Now, I live in Manchester, so bulk of my riding and the long rides that I do are out in the Peak District, which is a very, very hilly part of the world. And what you have to remember is that this is an aero race bike. It is designed for racing, not for long endurance rides. However, that is what most people will use a bike like this for. But what it meant was the gearing setup when it came to hills was unfavourable. There was a lot of gearing on the top end, but not enough on the low end, so no easy gears for me to get up these massive hills that I was riding up. So what would happen was I would end up going up these hills in the lowest gear, but it was nowhere near low enough, so I'd have to pump out an unsustainable amount of power, which would put my heart rate into the red. And then on longer days, if you keep going into the red, you're going to end up hitting a wall and bonking, and that is eventually what happened pretty badly on a local ride that I did called the Ring of Fire. 95k with 2k elevation, and yeah, that was probably the longest day I've ever had on a bike. So the stock gearing setup is 12-speed Shimano. On the front, the chain rings are 52-36 and the rear cassette was 11-30, and that 30 gear just was not enough. I just couldn't get my cadence quick enough when I started to fatigue at the end of the day. So what I've done is swap the 11-30 rear cassette for the 11-34, which means I've got a couple more gears at that lower end, which just makes climbing so much easier. I can keep my cadence higher. I don't necessarily go into the red every time I go up the hill now, and it's just made things so much better. I'm also going to be taking this bike to Austria, Zell-am-See, where I'm doing the Ironman 70.3 out there in the Alps, and the bike course is very, very hilly. Basically just one 15-kilometer climb up 900 meters of elevation, so I needed something that was much more climb friendly in the gear setup because I didn't want to be bonking out there. Speaking of the Ironman, I have just taken delivery of my race day shoes, the Saucony Endorphin Pro 4. Big up Saucony, these are sick. Funny because when I gave back the base model RCR to Van Rysel and they swapped it for that Pro one, I was noticing on Strava I was PBing every single climb basically, but what it was meaning was I was having to put out a lot more power just to get up the thing on that gear setup, and it was killing me off because I didn't realise that the gearing setup was different on the base compared to the Pro. The base one came with really friendly climbing gears actually. I think the front chain rings were a little bit smaller and the rear cassette was a 10-36 or 11-36, and that 36 was just beautiful for climbing. So that's just something to consider if you are in the market for an RCR. Have a look at the different specs, go down to the Van Rysel shops or Decathlon shops, get your hands on it just to get a feel for it, and yeah, just check out the specs. That is pretty much all I have to say. To summarise, it is a serious bit of kit and ultimately pretty good value compared to the rest of the market. So if you are in the business of looking for a sort of top-end performance aero race bike, this is one you could defo consider, especially if you don't want to end up spending 12 grand on one.